Hello, everybody. I'm Michael, and I am calling in today from Lawrence, Kansas. I happen to direct the KU Design Masters program, and so I've had various affiliations and so forth professionally with. I've been on the board of the Design Management Institute, and then here at in Kansas City area, I've given a few workshops and talks and various things. So as you can tell, I'm definitely the oldest dude here. So I can say that I am now in the third act of my professional design career, for better or worse. And basically, I just by way of introduction, I've had various kinds of gigs. I've worked in large software companies and various other places, and I've run a company called Human Centered for the last 20 years, which is a consulting firm, and we work in the healthcare and also the financial technology sector, developing financial service applications. So essentially, I'm not really a product designer. I'm more of a service designer. And I'm also a cognitive psychologist, just because when I graduated with a master's, I was a fine artist and I could not find work. And fortunately, I fell in love with design in designing department stores. And from there, I went on to do further graduate study. And I lucked out because I left the university. I used to be a professor at Maryland, and I left in 2003, and I started my consulting firm in a ski town in northern Utah. And it was the perfect time because the web was hitting, and it was just the perfect time to start a firm. And I never looked back. And so I returned to, I was asked to develop this graduate program at KU, and that's why I'm here. So that's a little bit about myself. Since Daniel's given a bit of a spiel on UXPA, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen and let me see here. Just to kind of give you an idea, our program's been running for now 14 years. We've graduated over 80 master's students. And basically, I guess we're sort of recruiting students for spring 2023. We have programs in interaction and user experience design, as well as design management and strategy. A few people in the session tonight have taken courses with me and kind of have some idea what the program's all about. Currently, we have 4 faculty members in the program. Hannah Park, who's a UX designer out of Parsons and York University, and Stephen Hassard, who's he's a human computer interaction dude, PhD. He teaches our human factors course, and he also works with Google now in Southern California. And then Brooke Graham, who is also, she's a graduate of our program, and she teaches our course in design scenarios and simulations. And if you have any interest in the program, I know graduate study isn't for everybody, but the program was really developed to take early to mid-career professional designers. It's not, how should I say, it's not intended to be a big academic program. It's intended to be a professional program. It's all about practice. And so if you have any interest, just email me at mde@ku.edu, and we'll send you out a little blurb. You can find out more about it, either whether to join the program like as a full-on master student, or just take a few courses. You can do that too without having to make an enormous commitment. So I was asked to basically to Bear with me for just a second. Okay. I was asked to sort of be the moderator tonight, so hopefully I don't talk too much. I've already probably talked too much already. But what I'd like to do is kind of introduce you to Bree Walter. She is one of our panelists today. And after Bree sort of tells a little bit about herself and a little informal bio, then we'll turn it over to Kwanzaa Humphrey. And then lastly, Scott Johnson. So Bree, do you want to take it away?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, hello. My name is Bree Walter. I recognize some faces and some names, but a lot of you are new. So hello, nice to meet you all. If I could give a quick little bio about myself, because it's kind of a crazy one. A few years ago, I was in a near fatal car accident, broke 5 bones, had a 6-month-long physical recovery, and in that process had a lot of existential questioning happening. And one of those questions was essentially asking myself if I really wanted to stay in the corporate world, as I was kind of an activist and a philanthropist on the side and kind of doing a lot of volunteer work on my own time. After having gone through that process, essentially decided that I wanted to leave the corporate world and transition into freelancing, specifically with nonprofits and not-for-profit organizations. And I also decided that I wanted to travel way more, and that I didn't want to just travel, say, for like a weekend or a week, that I wanted to travel for months at a time while still working. So I transitioned from, I got out of corporate and started my own freelance work with nonprofits, but then also put all my stuff in a storage unit and hopped in my Jeep with my dog and traveled around the States for a couple months, just camping out of the back of my Jeep and working out of it too. So kind of got into this nomadic lifestyle for a few months. And then now I would say I have maintained like a semi-nomadic lifestyle, where there are periods of time where I am working remotely on the road or from the road, some periods of time where I have my home base here in KC. But I now just do solely remote freelance work with nonprofits, not-for-profits, mostly centered in climate justice, social justice, spaces like that. Right now, the 2 projects that I'm working on are, I'm working with a nonprofit based out of LA that works on providing resources to people being impacted by the housing crisis. And then I also have a local client that you may be familiar with. They're KC Digital Drive. They're a great local organization that focuses on really essentially minimizing the digital equity gap in KC, especially after Google Fiber came into play a handful of years ago. So it is a segment of the local government system. But so that organization, what I do with them right now are a couple projects. One that's focused on helping nonviolent felons get their records expunged so they can get access to social services easier. And then the other project is helping kids from underprivileged neighborhoods, a lot of kids of color, get access to after-school resources and transportation to those resources. So working on a lot of projects right now that I'm super excited and jazzed about, and kind of love this lifestyle that I've sort of fallen into and or made for myself, and really excited to talk about it. Outside of work, I also used to be a UXPA board member back in the day as well too. I do a lot of kind of adventuring on the side as well. I rock climb, love camping, poetry, reading memoirs, thrifting, live music, and my dog Ollie. And I also am a rock climbing instructor. So that's
Cool.
me. Nice to meet you all. And I'll pass it over to Kwanzaa.
Okay. Kwanzaa. Yeah, you probably should have me go first. That's a lot of exciting things. How do you follow that? Well, I'll say, just listening to your bio, Michael, I'm kind of did the opposite direction, where you started in fine art and ended up in design. I started in design and kind of not necessarily transitioning, but I do a lot more fine art. So I'm in my studio here in downtown Overland Park. I am an oil painter, kind of a portrait painter, and I have a show coming up next month, December. Also, I was one of the 19 artists selected to have work in the new Kansas City airport. So I get to deliver some of that on Monday. So that'll be pretty exciting. I'm excited about that. The reception for that will be in February. So you're all invited. You have my personal invitation. So I graduated in like the late 90s and worked for several companies, large and small. Started off as a kind of an assistant art director. Worked for a small printing company. In fact, I remember asking in school at the time, we just got a T1. Somebody was on the internet and I was like, what is that? So I don't know if that really dates me or if I was just very naive, but I feel like I've kind of grown up with the internet, but professionally. And so, like I said, worked from small companies, large companies, worked at formerly Sprint, now T-Mobile. I probably spent the longest time there. Did a lot of, I started off as a multimedia designer, doing in the HR department, doing training, and kind of worked into the customer experience. So that was really fun as a project manager or project designer, I guess. We did a lot of design thinking. So we kind of got outside of the Borg that was Sprint at the time and try to really infuse some design thinking elements. We were, in retail and stores and corporate. So that was probably one of my more fun jobs until I got to work with Dan here at Garmin on our products. So I work in our wearables department in the advanced wellness devices, so watches. And so that's a lot of fun, kind of taking them from inception to the delivery and product and seeing that out in the wild. So and I work on our Venue line. The Venue 2 and 2 Plus are the ones that I kind of worked on. So that's a little bit about me. Obviously, outside of work, I do a lot of painting. So if I'm not at work or at home, I'm usually here at the studio. And it's kind of like, it's not really work for me. It's just kind of what I do. So, but I also I had an opportunity to kind of transition careers, and I looked at a lot of professional artists, and all of them really had second jobs and were doing that. And I really loved kind of design and UX anyway. And I really love kind of almost the opposites of how kind of fine art for me is more ambiguous and open to interpretation, and design and UX is really very intentional, and you really have to have very clear messages, and it's not really, you can't really leave it open to interpretation, right? So I kind of like both sides of those, and just really enjoy kind of playing in both fields. So that's a little bit about me. Feel free to ask questions when we get to that spot.
Cool. My name is Scott Johnson. I manage a design team at Amerisource Bergen, which is, I think, the 8th biggest company by revenue in the United States, but no one's ever heard of it. So we have our hands in like every healthcare pie possible. Our biggest part of our business is pharma supply chain. So drug distribution to a lot of independent pharmacies. But we also have a lot of businesses in care and care management, also a big pet health division as well. So my team focuses mostly on developing new products and services. So a lot of really ambiguous, ill-defined work that's really difficult and challenging, but also really rewarding at the same time. I have not too atypical for a UX designer, product designer, but I kind of came into the profession in a roundabout way. I actually thought I was going to be a musician. But then when kind of the band stuff fell through, I was like, oh, I need to get a job. So I actually got a business degree. I double majored in marketing and political science. And then kind of got into marketing world and did some startups and had a few failures and or middling success in startups. And then throughout that, as some of the marketing work I did, I kind of got more interested in design and became more aware of UX and everything, read Design of Everyday Things, and that kind of turned on the light bulb, if you will. And then ended up at Cerner, Also started the master's program at KU. I did not finish. Sorry, Michael.
That's okay. We don't care. No, we like them to finish, but it's not a requirement at all.
Yeah. Ended up at Cerner for several years, and ended up the last role I was at there was more product management, but then kind of got back into design world and really enjoyed that a lot. So that's kind of my professional career in a nutshell. As far as outside interests, I race bicycles, mountain bikes, road bikes, do a lot of that stuff. Also, I'm in the process of renovating my house, which is way more work than I thought it would ever be. The shows make it look much easier than it is. So yeah, that takes up a lot of my time outside work. Yeah, other than that, not a whole lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We got some interesting folks here today. And I welcome anybody who would like to ask a question or sort of maybe briefly, tell us who you are and why you're here tonight. Career is always a big deal, for design. Design has sort of blown up over the last 15 years or so, 20 years, just in scale and in just, in terms of visibility, nationally, internationally. So, a career now is kind of a viable thing. When I was a young guy, design was kind of like a backwater field. It wasn't really preeminent at all. And so it's kind of been amazing to watch how design has really grown and become significant in the greater scheme of things. So welcome any of you guys who would like to ask a question of our panelists, or maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Can any of you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Parker.
Hi, so my name is Parker Bond, and I am currently a student at JCCC, Johnson County Community. And before I go, I just want to point out this is my first time doing this, so I'm just trying to put on my best impression.
That's okay. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you have a question for one of us, that would be awesome.
Okay, so a little bit about myself. During my junior and senior year of high school, I was kind of exposed to programming, basic HTML, CSS, maybe some even graphic design, Adobe Illustrator. When it first got to JCCC, which was back in 2 years ago, I further took classes developing that, but I realized I was a little bit confused since it was COVID then, so I had no idea what I was doing until I took a class which is like UI UX, and I found myself leaning towards more the design aspect, UI UX. So I've been focusing more on that. And I've I was taking this meeting to find out how to start up my UI UX career. How do I go from college student to entry level? And other than that, that's basically it.
Awesome. Anybody have some advice for Parker here?
Yeah, I can hop in, Parker. Thank you so much for the question. And I'm so glad you're here. And you did a great job, by the way. So thank you, and keep that up. I love seeing people hopping into networking and embracing that. Yeah, honestly, what worked for me whenever I was a student was accessing resources that my campus offered in terms of career fairs. and networking with local organizations that I was interested in from a volunteer aspect. So whenever I was in college, there were a multitude of career fairs that were held on campus, and I'm not sure if GCCC has those types of events, but that was really great for me to like, just for you to simply see what kind of organizations or companies are out there, and for you to start to get an idea of what companies might you might be interested in. So there's that aspect, right, of like finding the place that that you want to work, but then there's the side of it of like improving your skills and really getting into the discipline. And I think that is where I mean, I don't know if the program that you're in right now offers the extent of UX and UI education that you're looking for. If not, you might consider supplemental education in that field. Or you can also, there's a lot of resources online that offer kind of like just free boot campy style courses. And that's usually where I tell people to kind of dip your toes in the water and see if this field is really something that you're passionate about and something that you feel like comes naturally for you. So I would say, utilize the resources that your campus has, and then also try to work on just expanding your knowledge of the field as much as you can. So reading articles, reading books, listening to podcasts, and we can, I'm sure that everybody on this call has lots of advice as to what books to read and what podcasts to listen to. But it's really just like diving into like immersing yourself in that knowledge. I think that's one of the first steps. But I'll let Kwanzaa and Scott weigh in as well.
Yeah, I would, to add to that, I would say there are like two main approaches I would take. One is like hard technical skills. So using tools like Figma, Sketch, Photoshop, Illustrator, like getting good at those types of things, prototyping tools, and getting in lots of reps in that. So trying a lot of things, trying to recreate designs you think are good, seeing how they're built, seeing how they're constructed, and really doing a lot of really crappy work for a while. That's just how it is. And then once you do enough crappy work, then your work will finally start to be okay. And then you do a lot of okay work, and then it'll start to not, like, you kind of have to level up and put in the time in getting the reps in, and that, so to speak. The other lane I would say is more like the soft design skills, design thinking skills. So, how to do workshops, how to do good interviews, do like user interviews, usability testing, less on the like actual designing, more on the like discovery and research side of things. Like understand why a product is good, what makes a good experience. Like that part of the house is equally as important as being able to craft a really good looking UI or interaction. So those are the two main areas I would focus on.
Great.
Yeah,
Very good.
maybe just to add on to that is, just look at internships in the field, because a lot of that will come from the college, but look at those. I'd say doing some audits. I think that was something that really helped me, like just doing a UX audit of different websites as you're building your portfolio, understanding, all the heuristics and kind of what makes that website good or not so good. I think a lot of that research will kind of help you in building your own skills. So, I reiterate, everything that Scott and Bree also said. So.
And one more thing actually that I thought about, probably like a really quick action item that you can do is finding a mentor in the field that you really admire and that you can, sit down with over coffee, and some of the specific questions where you're like, I don't understand what heuristics are, or like, tell me how do you host a workshop, or, like one-on-one conversation. I think what for me was way more beneficial early on than just trying to access the encyclopedia of information.
Very good. Thank you. As I was, thank you very much, Parker. one thing I would like to suggest is, you know, I happen to use that weird metaphor of a career being, or a design career, let's say, ideally being sort of a three-part act. There's kind of like the first act, which is, you know, maybe a little bit where Parker is at this present time, just kind of starting out, finding your way, developing your skill set, competencies, and just sort of understanding the discipline, if you will. And then you kind of evolve and you get into other facets of your career. And I think, you know, Kwanzaa, Bree, and Scott have sort of spoken to how things have changed, you know, having now being in sort of the early second act of your careers and so forth. So you're still really vital. You still have energy and ambition and so forth. And I think that, you know, in a way, your career sort of changes and has new opportunities and new challenges. I'm curious, what kind of, have you found that you've maybe sometimes had to deal with career transitions and, you know, moving from act to act and trying to find your way? It can seem a little bit overwhelming sometimes, and it's easy to get discouraged when there's no clear direct path right ahead of you. Does anybody have any bright ideas for how you cope with some of those career path questions?
Yeah, I would say, oh, sorry, Scott. Can you jump in?
Go ahead.
All right. I would just say, you know, kind of starting out, and a lot of the times you're going to learn what you don't like to do, but you don't know it until you actually get in and kind of start with it. And really kind of, sometimes you just got to do some grunt work, and it's a lot of kind of production and things. And when you're in a company and you have kind of other people that are doing a lot of the things that you want to do, a lot of times you can kind of get beside and talk. I know a lot of companies have a lot of mentorship type opportunities. So I would say really act, don't do a lot of spinning and thinking about kind of, okay, where do I go? And just really jump in. One of the kind of design thinking methodologies is to act and go, because you're going to learn and fail fast and kind of continue to grow. So
it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say try a lot of different things, and don't be afraid to feel like you need to stay forever as a UI designer or UX designer. I've kind of ping-ponged from between business and UX, and sometimes those breaks from UX are good, and I get to see different perspectives, and then if I want to come back, I get energized again about the profession and creating new things. So yeah, like having that optionality is I think a good thing. And also like it gives you a bunch of different paths to pursue if you decide that something isn't for you, or if you're kind of burnt out on.
Awesome.
And I'll be the person that throws in mindfulness and self-awareness and intentional thoughts, because I think that it was an epiphany for me whenever I went from like having the types of mindset of being like, I hate my job, I really like just am not happy, and just like ruminating in that and being like, I don't know what to do, and then turning that into, what don't I like about my job? What would I rather do instead of what I'm doing right now? What parts of my, you know, what about my day, like what part in the day is like upsetting me? Like I start my day happy, when do I start becoming upset? And what is that unique thing that, you know, like I could change? And or like asking yourself, what are my values in life? And how could I translate that to where, I think like just having those conversations in your head, like much more intentional conversations about really what you want, what you like, what you don't like, what feels right, what doesn't feel right, and like dissecting that. Once you can get to that state of thinking and like mindset, then you can really like create your own path and not just simply like be present in the path that has landed your way, you know?
That's awesome. I think I, at one point, kind of came to the realization that I had different interests at different points of my career. And I think your example, Bree, and how you sort of came to grips with some of these kind of existential questions in your life. I sometimes looked at the work I was doing and trying to figure out, from, let's say, from 1 to 10, how satisfying is the work I'm doing? Is it like a 3 or is it a 7 or an 8, And then if you go in a different direction, kind of like a 2x2 matrix, if you can plot, how valuable or impactful is the work you're doing. So you can actually kind of use those 2 dimensions to track your degree of relevance and satisfaction compared to how much impact or value that you're creating. And if you really want to maximize the value or maximize the satisfaction, I mean, that's pretty demanding. Those are tough questions that we have to ask ourselves. And I would say I'm kind of glad that design is not a licensed profession, because, in some regards, there's downsides to not having licensure, but in another sense, it gives you a great deal of, capacity to sort of chart your own course and not get a lot of people's permission. I mean, the degree is kind of you punch your ticket and you get a degree of one kind or another. You don't have to have a master's. You don't have to have a bachelor's. You don't have to have a degree at all to be a designer. And so I kind of like that freedom. And is anybody, whether you're either a panelist or one of our members of the group here tonight, if you have any thoughts on that, kind of the freedom, but also the responsibility to try to maximize your value here as a designer of one kind or another. Anybody have any thoughts on any of that stuff? You can also pitch in too, Dan, if you'd like.
Michael, oh, Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm not able to have my camera on, but first of all, I just love that this is one of the questions that we're able to talk about this evening. I mean, I think one thing that this question of education comes to mind for me is that there's so many ways that folks, in a way, get motivated. Like sometimes it's interesting or helpful to have the structure of having other people around you, having folks that are working on, particular projects together. For other folks, it really is a more organic, maybe sort of like wandering path. So I don't know. So I think part of it is that self-knowledge, and I think Bree sort of spoke to that a bit as well, just as far as being able to kind of see like what type of learner are you, and to be able to leverage the kinds of the sort of multiple ways that one can get into anything in UX, being one space where there's a lot of different paths to be able to choose from. So that's what initially comes to mind for me. It's a variety of those conditions.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Breck, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah, sure. One of the things, so I don't have a design. I haven't done design. I work with an organization. We do software applications, but I have a lot of broad-based experience. And to your point, my wife sometimes says you finally figured out what you want to do in your 50s. So I said, well, I haven't grown up yet. But one of the things that I look at design, we're talking a lot about applications, but I've read a lot. And when we're in discussions with businesses and things about applications and stuff like that, I have industrial process experience and software and technology and infrastructure. Design, to me, one thing you can take, and I think, Scott, you mentioned it, is you can apply that not only to the application, but business. And design thinking, to me, can be expanded in a number of things, whether you're working on a product that's a physical, tangible, hardware type product, or you're going into a software application, or you're looking at a process. And so I was going to ask Michael, so one of the things I've done, Parker, is I really get excited about understanding the value chain in businesses and the process. And I start to think so I don't know if it's actual 100% design thinking. I've taken a few online courses. I haven't taken any formal degrees, but I start to think about how's that look from a user experience all the way from inception to whatever you're trying to deliver, knowing it'll iterate. But what I was going to ask Michael is what are you seeing too? We're talking a lot about software and stuff. What are you seeing about design thinking in other areas? I mean, financial engineering, things like that. What, do you see much of that or?
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the power, I think, of design generally. It's really it's really, design can scale at various levels. It can be very specific and technical and, focused on a particular project or context, but it can also expand to, broader areas and such. And I think that's really kind of exciting that it can grow with you. In other words, you don't sort of grow out of it. It can grow with you, and you can expand your competencies, your interests, and it can apply to all kinds of things. I swear, I've worked in healthcare settings. I've worked in fairly complex systems, environments, and to a large degree, I happen to have a brother who's a industrial engineer and also a systems engineer, and his career kind of went one way and mine went another. I was more of the fine artist originally and so forth. But over the years, we came back together, and he runs healthcare systems, and we were able to contribute some work to a project that they were doing. And suddenly my brother and I were able to connect at a systems level. He understood my perspective because design thinking is a great deal, it's really derived from systems theory. And so he was able to understand where I was coming from in designing optimal customer, user, patient experiences. And I was able to better understand how he manages these broad, complex systems of healthcare. And to me, that's kind of amazing that we kind of stumbled into this weird thing, because I'm just the little brother, that was always kind of the, artsy fartsy guy. And he was like the serious, badass kind of engineer type. And suddenly we realized we have a lot more in common than we ever imagined. So, sorry, thank you. Any other thoughts or comments from the group tonight, or questions for our panelists?
I have a question.
Great, please.
Yeah, well, I'm Cayman. I'm an artist and designer. I studied painting for my undergrad at the Rhode Island School of Design. And then the past decade or so, I've worked at art galleries and museums in New York. And then now doing a career change. So I'm currently in a boot camp, Thinkful's online program, studying UX UI. So I'll wrap that up in March. But speaking of education, and you're sort of saying this isn't a license, design's not a licensed thing. It made me think of, there are all of these, online certifications for, almost anything. Are there any specific ones that any one of you all have seen that that either you're interested in or you think would be good to kind of stack on top of a UX and UI design program, whether it be, data analytics, probably some coding, HTML, CSS. I know sort of anything you learn is valuable, but are there any that you guys have learned or that stick out or that you would recommend?
It's a little bit of the Wild West, and which is why, I mean, it kind of depends what you're going for. Like the Google one is pretty good. The General Assembly one has some credibility. But yeah, it really depends on what you're trying to find. I think maybe some of the coding ones might be a little bit more, like if you're looking for something a little bit more outside of your wheelhouse, those might be a little bit more beneficial. Whereas like a a master's program like at KU might get you some more in-depth, like deeper expertise or visibility, or not visibility, like experience with the topic. So yeah, I also don't necessarily think that those boot camps are necessary from like a credential standpoint, because really your portfolio is probably going to, like, your portfolio and your network are probably going to be your two main like important things to get jobs. So like focus on those first. If you need to, like, well, one, if you're interested, like do it. If you're just interested in it, like that's, go ahead and do that. But from like a resume or portfolio, if you need to fill a gap, that's also another reason to maybe do one. But like, yeah, I would say focusing on portfolio and getting good experience and case studies to put into a portfolio, and then expanding your network is, you know, important. But yeah, if there's like a, I'm rambling. So I feel like I've got some experience here because like I did part of the master's program. I didn't finish it, but it was really valuable. I think that reflects more on me than the program. But I think when I went into it, I thought I needed the credentials. But as I gained experience and, you know, the ability to craft a good portfolio, I think me thinking I needed that credential, I think dissipated a little bit, if that makes sense.
Very good.
Sorry, that was a rant, but
Don't worry about that, Scott. I swear some of the best people that I hire are students who were students in my program but never graduated, but they're just so fucking good that I have to hire them because they make me look great, you know? So that's awesome. Anybody else have any comment? Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, if I can jump in. So I'm now a big proponent of not like just getting into the field and then trying to figure out a way to make yourself happy with what you've landed in, but really like starting with like, what are you passionate about? What are your values? What areas do you love? Like absolutely love, like for me is climate and like the outdoors and sustainability. So once, like for me, it was like once I found those values, then I was like, you know what? I don't have to get further design education. Instead, I'm going to go work on a farm. I'm going to go volunteer with a climate organization. I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to get like that lived experience of the field that I want to contribute the most to, because having that like real, having like the lived experience of the field that you're trying to get into, not like from just simply like the hard skill design knowledge, because you're getting that in your course, but like building this empathy, this firsthand experience and encounters, and like all of that like soft skill, like that's really going to be what ultimately what like sets you apart from all the rest of the people that apply at a job, is that you have like that boots on the ground passion and like that experience. So that's kind of an unconventional answer, but that's essentially like what kind of revolutionized my career for me.
That's great. Thank you so much. Maybe just a general, and you panelists feel free to contribute your points as well as much as you'd like. One thing I would want to mention is that nowadays people are having to work productively and earn income for 40, 50 years. And the big question is, how long can a career that you have, or how long can it sustain? How does it sort of have to change to a certain extent? I mean, there are certain things that come out of, you know, sort of finding yourself turned into a dinosaur. Somehow that's a challenge if you know, some of your skill set is just aged and kind of become a little bit obsolete. That's kind of where you kind of have to retool a little bit. Also, sometimes you may find in your jobs or whatever that you've become kind of invisible, that you're just kind of one of those dudes who works in, you know, Department C and so forth, and you don't necessarily stand out, or you're not getting promotions. That's kind of an issue for a lot of people. And some folks find that mid-career, they kind of need a jump start. You know, in fact, one reason why I took this job at KU is I realized, seeing so many designers that I'd known, is that after a while, they kind of plateau in their career, and that they kind of move up a little bit, they get, you know, better jobs, or they move around. But to some extent, they can kind of plateau and kind of find themselves in a bit of a rut. And so that's why I thought, that's kind of why we developed the KU Design Masters program, is to sort of like take early to mid-career designers and give them some kind of power to, you know, develop capabilities to evolve their careers to be more, if you will, employable or, you know, promotable, that kind of thing, or just to shift careers. You know, that's kind of what is exciting to me when you see, you know, when Scott started taking some of our courses, man, he had a heck of a story to tell, and he'd had business experience. You know, a lot of designers don't have that, you know, so he brought a lot to the table. Some that was, I think, helpful in his design education. He had some context. So anybody,
Yeah,
if you have thoughts on making career sustainable, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also add, like, some of the cohort, the people that I was taking classes with also had some unique experience too, like the career switchers. I think the program was incredibly helpful for them, not being exposed to design before, and having the, you know, the good group discussions, you know, helping build the network. I still, you know, have run into Kirby every now and then. So like for that kind of, you know, if you're looking to make a change, you're looking to get more experience in a particular area, a program like the KU program, I think would be good for a lot of people.
Great. Once again, I am kind of promoting the program, but I wanted that to go, like, let's put that in my back pocket. I don't want to talk about that anymore. But how about you folks? What brought you to this session tonight? What are your interests that you felt you wanted to have voiced, and maybe ask some questions of our panelists?
Well, I kind of have a question. I've kind of, well, this relates to the question. I kind of exposed myself to the design aspect as well as coding. Well, to anyone who's a UI UX designer, is there coding involved in UI UX?
Depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
my question or my answer, Parker, is only if you want there to be, because you choose your career path. So if you want there to be coding because you enjoy coding, or I think you're good at it, then there can be. But if you don't want that because you found out that you like the design side more than the coding side, then there doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
I think that's a great answer.
I learned how to code at one point in my career, and then I realized that I was working as a design strategy director for a big software company, and most of our company had plenty of fantastic coders. They didn't need the designers coding, and it was kind of awesome. That allowed us to focus on stuff that engineers don't or can't easily do. So it's absolutely not a requirement. It's nice if you can do stuff like that, but it's absolutely, there's plenty of great coders out there that can do that very well. They can't necessarily design well, and that's a problem for them. Anybody else have a question or comment?
Real quick, I would like to add to that. It is still good to know limitations and the guardrails, what the technology can do, can't do. Because designing within those constraints and knowing knowing all those things is really helpful when you're having those discussions with developers around implementation of a design.
Cool. Very good. Awesome. Let me see here.
I'll throw in a question.
Please.
So I am actually still very young in my UX career, and I look to you all as mentors. I'm curious, like, just from the time that you've been in UX, what have you seen kind of change? What have you kind of aged into, for lack of a better word? Like, what are kind of like newer and maybe even more controversial kind of topics in the UX field that you see from like the higher perch that you have now as a designer?
I think there's probably, as I mentioned, I worked as a design strategy director for a company called Sybase, which is now another company that's been bought up, but it's one of the largest. And I was hired as a creative director for that company, financial technology. And within six months, I had somehow finagled a way to change my title from design creative director to design strategy director. And that proved to be extraordinarily helpful, not just to me and my career, but to my company, because we were able to provide sort of more strategic design understandings and advice and so forth to our clients. And they really loved it. And because we could deal with them at a level that let's say a typical UI or a UX designer couldn't. And that's just stuff that you have to learn over time to sort of develop and to grow your capabilities to make you more valuable and contribute in different ways, because there are cases where you do kind of grow out of a type of discipline or job, and you want to be able to sustain your career long enough that you can also, oh, by the way, you can also make a lot more money sort of working at that level, by the way. So I don't say that, in any sort of self-beneficial way, but it just makes life more interesting when you can grow your capacity as a designer and contribute in ways that most designers can't. And that gives you a lot of options. And it's always great to have options. Anybody else have any thoughts or contributions that questions you'd like to ask our panel tonight?
I had some things to add to that. One, like the advent of AI, like the things that GPT-3 and DALL-E 2 can do are pretty crazy. And so generative design is going to be a huge deal over the next decade. And what's that mean for the profession? I don't know.
Yeah.
Thing two is when you get to a certain point in your career in design, you want to have more impact. And then when you figure that out, when you realize what that means, it means like getting more involved in business things. And I think that's an area where a lot of designers struggle. And business and product management. And so there's often like this desire to be, more involved, having that seat at the table, which is a term I don't like to use, but being able to, fight for your cause and go toe to toe with business and product management and be effective in those conversations. And that's an area where I see a lot of designers like trying to get to, but struggling or not necessarily struggling, but always kind of striving to like be involved in those higher level conversations. So that's an area that I think a lot of designers still struggle with, even though we've come a long way.
Great.
Yeah, I might just reiterate on some of that, because I would say, even in early in your career, being able to talk to people, kind of really listen, kind of understand what motivates them, what their kind of intentions are, will also serve you, like what Scott was saying, when you get to that higher level, because I mean, there's motivations behind a lot of kind of those decisions. And once you start understanding those using your design skills, you can kind of help shape those in a way that are obviously, better for the user, better for the experience. So I would just always encourage you to be, just be curious, have lots of empathy, talk to lots of people, watch how people work, how people use products, and then just ask why. Okay, why are they doing that? Try and go deeper into some of the decisions that they're making, some of the decisions you're making. Don't just kind of take that first stab at it. Just really dive deep, because there a lot of times things are solved very superficially, and they continue to have the same problems. So it's really kind of getting to those cores, and that comes from really watching, really listening, being really curious, and asking lots of questions, and being willing to learn.
Cool. David, you happen to turn your camera on. I swear you're about to say something.
I
can feel
am.
it.
Kwanzaa and Scott, you're both in corporate America. Do your managers or senior managers have backgrounds in UI UX as well? And if not, is that a difficulty for you with your career?
Mine is an engineering background, but surprisingly has a lot of UX acutement. And I work with a lot. I mean, my team is product managers, engineers, designers, and I think the way we work is we all are really looking at the user experience. And I might mention too that in my career, I've seen the user experience gain a lot more credibility than it has in the past. It's a lot of times it's make it work, make it look good, but not really focus too much on the experience. And now everybody really desires that, because it makes a difference. So within my team, even though I have the kind of the user experience title, I'm able to bounce things off of other people and get their perspective from kind of an engineering, okay, what's possible, from a product manager, from having the product out in the field and what's going to sell. And so you have to really balance a lot of those elements to really get to a good experience. Because I mean, you can really hold your toe the line, and it's like, no, we're not releasing until this happens. And then you're not a good team player. You're not you're holding up the product, and that's really, you're gonna run into a lot of headaches. So it's a spectrum of getting to the best experience, getting to a good enough experience, and really fighting not to really go much below that, but really kind of understanding and working with people, like I said, and understanding their motivation and understanding what makes them tick, and to really kind of shape kind of the direction.
That's awesome. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I've experienced both. Well, when I say both, having managers, like senior managers, not come from that background, and then senior managers with some of that design background. Fortunately, I'm in a situation now where senior leadership does have a lot of design experience and also some business experience too. So I think that helps them be more effective in going to the C-suite and be like, hey, we need X million dollars to invest to staff these projects, and because these are directly related to these corporate goals for the year. So that's helpful for them to have that experience. It can make things more of a challenge when they don't, because there's that disconnect, speaking the language and really being able to sell the vision back up to other functional areas.
I would
I
say
was going to
that.
take that. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Michael. I was just going
I
to
was
take that
just
same
going to-
question and throw it to Bree as well, and see if there's a difference as someone who works with clients and the folks they're working with, not kind of vibing with the idea of what it means to be a designer or what the design process is.
Yeah, Bree, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Well, what I found is that ultimately at the root of it, if they have like radical empathy as a basis that they're operating from, I have found that we can make the semantics and the processes and like all those things work. but it's easier for me to work with a client that has that we're on the same page about design and what we're trying to provide for the end user than if we have, say, I've had a client that was over processed things, but then, so it was very in the weeds of the processes and like the design phases, but then at the end of the day, like just really wasn't working from a place that they like had that empathy for the end users. So I think there's, it's sort of, it kind of just depends, I would say. I think there's a level, like I usually have like an elevator pitch that if I'm working with stakeholders in an organization that doesn't have like the really hard skill understanding of the discipline, I give like a little bit of an elevator pitch and like explain certain things. And here's my proposed process and here's why it's important. And this is what it looks like, and kind of just like bring them along with you. And again, if they're operating from like the right mindset of, yeah, we'll do anything that you say because we want to get to this end place together, then it'll work, But I think I also get the privilege of like coming in as this, quote unquote expert that they're hiring externally, and that they're probably willing to listen to me more than maybe somebody who's like a full-time mid-level designer in a big like corporate setting. So I understand that I have a privilege in like making them come along for the ride with me. So there's that.
I will say, David, that 20 years ago, or even 25 years ago, when I started doing this work around user experience design, nobody had ever heard of it before. It was a really tough slog trying to get buy-in from clients or corporate leaders and so forth, because they didn't hear about it in business school. And so now I'd say that the wind is kind of at our back, that if anything, we'd better deliver. We can't just bullshit our way through. We have to provide real value that has a bottom line effect and also creates joy and satisfaction among users. So that's a big responsibility. And I kind of envy you guys because you're kind of in the right place. And this field didn't exist when I started out. And it just we kind of had to just make it up because it didn't exist. And so fortunately, I came from the world of software where it sort of was born. And then we found ways to apply it to all kinds of industries. So like I say, I envy you guys. Any other thoughts or comments for our panel?
Yeah, I'll jump in. My name's Chris. I'm a product design manager. And actually I'm coming at it from a standpoint of I want to make sure my design org has, guide rails in place or infrastructure in place to provide for a junior level designer that comes along and wants to progress in their career. So my question to the panelist is, if let's say I'm a junior level designer, I want to get promoted to mid-level or mid to senior, and either I don't want to wait around for my manager to promote me, or maybe I've been in my same spot for 2 years, kind of stagnating. What advice would you have for someone that wants to stick with the same company but move up?
Okay, somebody's got to come up with something.
I'll take a stab at this. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think there's probably a multitude of answers that because every company, every situation, every team is different, and also every manager is different. And I have found that ultimately it usually does. It's quite dependent on the leaders you have above you. So what I have found is that just like we have to do with UX oftentimes is to be quantitative. And so the way that I was able to like move up, get promotions, get raises whenever I felt like I was owed them but was not being given them was simply put all of the metrics and qualitative value that I have provided for the team, for the product, for the company, for the user, and essentially be pretty straightforward about the impact that you're delivering and the value you're providing, and essentially put it on them, like, why, here's everything that I've provided, explain to me what else you're expecting if not this. So it worked for me best whenever I had that clear cut, the proof is in the pudding or whatever kind of mindset. And also when you stand your ground, especially in corporate settings, they will budge if you stand your ground. Oftentimes they're just waiting for you to not stand your ground, because that's the easy, it's easy to just kind of continue with things the way they are. But if you actively stand up for yourself and express your demands and what you're asking for, a lot of times that can be better received.
Yeah, I like to move around. I don't know about you guys. I don't want to stay in a place too long if I'm not super welcome, and if I don't feel there's a career or a path to advancement. And either you can diversify your skills and abilities and make you more employable and so forth, or you can find a more friendly environment to go to and work at. And sometimes that's a way to move up, is just sort of 2 years is kind of a lifetime in design years. I mean, traditionally designers moved around a lot, and that's the way they got more money. But it doesn't hurt to take a chance. You're going to have to sort of be a little bit ambitious, look out for yourself. That's a really good point. Go ahead.
I don't know what your situation is, but we, in teams that I've been on, we've worked with HR to develop really clear, as unambiguous as possible, career pathing and laddering. What are the criteria that define a senior, a lead, a principal, management, those kinds of things. So having those in place, having that good relationship with HR is actually important in that aspect, to then be able to turn around to the reports and be like, okay, this is the criteria. As as transparent and as clear as those criteria can be, then okay, what do we need to do to get you to be hitting these? Is how can I support that report to be able to hit all these targets? And then and if they are, then you need to be able to follow through and be able to promote them. And if they're not, be really direct and clear as to why they're not meeting it in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Awesome. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Chris, or if you have a follow-up or what.
No, that definitely helps. Funny enough, I was in a meeting this afternoon where we were talking about getting that career matrix in place and talking about what it would be good for. And it was almost like one of those where, you see, you're talking about something and later in the day you see an ad for it. It was right after I got off that meeting that I noticed this email for the UXPA meeting, and I was like, this would be good to jump into. But it was like you guys were in that meeting just reading our thoughts.
Very good. Anything else you guys would like to say on the panel or one of our audience here?
I got one. When it comes as well, do UI UX designers often work alone or in a team?
Well, it depends. Generally, there's a team if you're working for a company, Parker. I think there are cases where, if you have your own sort of, if you're working freelance, you may be dependent pretty much on yourself. So you have to be able to do a lot of different things. But the nice thing about, getting a gig with a company, if there's other designers as well, or that way you can kind of get mentors find a mentor to kind of work with you and get familiar. I mean, and it doesn't hurt to just get some formal training, you know, that can make a big difference. Getting a really solid platform of just knowledge. And that's the kind of thing you can't always just get from taking workshops and stuff. That platform is something you're going to kind of have to build your career upon. And so it better be, you know, pretty decent to begin with, kind of like a foundation. But I don't know, a few years ago, I was asked to go back to my college where I went to, place where I went to college and give a talk. And it had changed a lot. They had developed a UX program, and that program didn't exist even vaguely when I was there. And I happened to quote this, you know, famous quote from Steve Jobs when he was giving a lecture at Stanford. He said, "You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, whether it's your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life." So there's always this kind of anxiety and kind of these questions that we have is, you know, what is the best step for me? And you may not, you're not going to know for sure starting out. You can kind of get some help and advice by getting some training or finding mentorship. But ultimately, you kind of have to trust yourself, your instincts, as Bree was talking about. She was able to sort of like, or at least as I can understand, she was able to kind of discern what was important for her. And because being happy and satisfied ultimately is the goal, right? And there's no guarantee that having you know, some sort of UX job for any company is going to be in and of itself all that gratifying. You know, there can be good jobs and bad jobs. So I think you kind of have to like develop some ability to kind of look hard and make some choices on your own and take some chances. And Tisha, how are you tonight? What are your thoughts on what we've been talking about?
I'm sorry.
What are your thoughts after hearing all this stuff so far?
You know, I've enjoyed the conversation this evening. I'm currently an art director at an ad agency, looking to make a transition over to product design, UX design. I've had a chance throughout my career to be involved with some UX teams and everything, but just have not been able to do that fully as my full-time role. So glad to be here and hear everyone's experience throughout their career and kind of the different paths that people have taken and everything. So
Awesome.
Thanks.
I don't have any specific questions or anything, but glad to be here.
Great.
And Michael, I might just make another comment on Parker's question about team too. I think in addition to just kind of the role that you play, you know, whether it's, you know, as a freelancer or, you know, in a company, you know, at the corporation, there comes a time kind of in the project where you have a team. So early on in that project, you're really gathering information, and there's a team of people that is giving, you know, the requirements, you know, kind of what they're looking for. And it's really, you know, the onus is on you to really ask a lot of those good questions. And then you kind of do some of that solo work and kind of create your, you know, your ideas and designs. And maybe that's, you know, where you're more not working necessarily in a team. But then there's also that moment after that where you're, you know, now you're presenting this project, you're presenting your ideas. Hopefully you've come up with several ideas and you're getting feedback early on, and being able to not necessarily have a thick skin, but be really open to criticism, open to feedback, open to understanding what you're trying to achieve, what people are really looking for, and where you think it should go. But also being able to kind of sell your idea on why what you are creating, what you have kind of come up with, the solution to the problem that you've found, why that is the right solution, why you should go that. And also, I would also encourage you, there's the testing part of it. So you're going to go from, working with a team to working individually, and it's kind of back and forth just in the life cycle of a project, in addition to maybe some of your day-to-day work.
Great. I would think about, if you're really interested in design and in this regard, if you're kind of serious about it, you almost have to look at your career as a design problem and come up with alternative scenarios, and as to how, what kind of futures do you want to have, as a designer. And having done that, I think it can help. We happen to teach a graduate course here in strategic design innovation, and one of the projects we do is to develop career scenarios based on sort of principles and methods of scenario planning. If you think about your career in a strategic way, not just day to day, job to job, employer to employer, but if you think long term, you kind of have, that is a strategic question. Where can I best thrive? Where can I have maximal opportunities to diversify and learn new stuff? Because we really shouldn't ever stop learning, right? I mean, look at all the stuff that you guys just for instance, in case of Bree and Kwanzaa and John and Scott, you guys have had to learn a bunch of stuff over the years, and it's kind of, I think, sort of made you more resilient. And so I think you kind of have to, this is really precious time that you can't just kind of piss away. You really have to sit down and, think things through and try to find ways to maximize your opportunities.
Yeah, I would kind of reiterate some of that, is especially like laying that good foundation in design, because the tools, the technology, all of those things would change. I mean, I started out as a Flash developer, and we see kind of where that went. That was the programming, that I did, ActionScript and things like that. But
you're dating yourself, buddy.
am I right? But I mean, when you have that good solid foundation, design thinking, principles of design, elements of, heuristics and all of those different things, those really aren't, technology specific. Those are, I mean, what's, human factors is, born in aviation. So, I mean, and you would see how far it's kind of come, but I mean, get that solid, foundation, and don't worry necessarily about the technology, because trends change, technology changes, but you'll still be relevant, and being able to, make those connections and see all those kind of those pathways.
Wow. You guys are awesome. This has been fun. I don't know, Daniel, is this what you expected? I had no idea, but it was fun.
Definitely. I wanted to pull this group together just to be surprised, and I definitely was. This is amazing. And I know we only have a few more minutes left. If there's a last burning question anybody has, we could probably, wrap up on that. Kate, I just saw you joined.
Kate has one, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I just turned my camera on, but I do want to say thank you to all the panelists and everyone. This has been great, and it was really awesome hearing your stories, and yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm afraid I
have
don't.
one last question if there's time.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, very sort of practical question, but if you were a hiring manager, or if you've worked on hiring teams in the past, what in a portfolio would make someone or a candidate stand out, or make you want to call them and have a conversation with them?
For me, because I have done a ton of hiring throughout my career, I look for that person being a person, like that and by that I mean that they are showing me their personality, and that I feel like I could actively work 8 hours or so a day with this person, that they are giving me some kind of energy, that that they have a life outside of work, and that they are, that you can kind of like see things shine through their portfolio that make them feel like a person. And then the second thing is that I want to see that you understand the full process of product design. You don't necessarily have to be experienced at that whole process, but I want to kind of understand, or I want you to at least speak to all the different gears that turn in the process of a project. But I don't want a novel. So especially as a hiring manager who's looking at I don't know, 60 plus portfolios possibly in a span of trying to hire for one role. I think a lot of people try to defer to putting in all the information you could think of, because that will help the hiring managers show or know that I know what I'm talking about. I prefer that you do have that full understanding of the process and show it to me, but that it's succinct, and that you highlight the key points. It's a bulleted list. Here's the really important things you need to know that demonstrate my experience, without requiring you to sit down for 2 hours with my portfolio to read through one case study. Those are my two biggest ones.
Yeah, agree with all that. Clear, concise communication. It kind of depends on the seniority or on the role a little bit, but the ability to write well, at minimum, there's a floor of visual skills that I would probably prefer. And yeah, being able to clearly, concisely articulate your understanding of design, your contributions on what the case study is about, those kinds of things.
Well, I might reiterate too, just your ability to work with a team, because a lot of times you're going to be working with developers, product managers, and some of those ideas are going to be opposing. So being how you work with the team, how well you communicate your ideas and kind of get them published and through. So
Cool, awesome.
And
Thank you.
also, one extra thing I'll add is that you put in a little bit of work to jazz it up. Show me some drop shadow, mock-up presentations on a device frame that would actually be the device frame used for the project, and not just a Figma file. Kind of you're really presenting your work. So well, and especially because you have the background in painting, right? So present it to me I'm in your studio of work, right?
Yeah. Hiring managers, we see so many portfolios, and so many of them don't stand out and are bad. So it shows that A, you have that ability, and B, you care and invested more time into your portfolio. The more senior you get and the better your network is, that matters less, but especially early career and junior levels like that, it's just important, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But yeah, it's just, there's a lot to wade through.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much.
So I know that this puts us right at 7:30. Oh my gosh, it was 7:30 on the dot, and I'm gonna have to go over to just thank everybody for joining us. And I know with these Zoom events, it's unfortunate because we don't really have a chance to have a corridor or a hallway to talk and decompress and corner one another and just keep the conversation going. So I just wanted to encourage y'all to, I'll put my plug in for UXPA KC right there. If you want to join our mailing list or our Slack group, we talk on Slack a ton about this stuff, and we can, decompress there. But also Kwanzaa, Scott, Bree, Michael, if you have links or LinkedIn links you want to share, we can kind of try to follow up with that and just kind of keep the conversation going. The pandemic and the virtual environment and all that stuff, it makes it so much harder to connect, but we want to keep the conversation going with y'all and grow our UX community. So I'll also just say tomorrow night from 5 to 7 p.m. at Parlor in Kansas City, UXPA Kansas City will be hanging out for a little bit. So hope to see some of y'all in person. And yeah, it's just been so great talking to y'all, and I hope we get to see some of you again.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Dan. Thank you, Michael. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Feel free to, I threw my LinkedIn link into the chat, and feel free to connect with me. Hope to stay in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.